This is Evangelist Henry Walker. Thank you for tuning into my podcast. Maybe you're listening to the podcast on my website at henrywalker.org under audio messages, or maybe you're listening to me at podpoint.com/Henry Walker, or maybe you're listening to me on my YouTube channel, New Life Revival International Henry Walker. I want to start a new message today talking about in this pre-rapture season how the Father wants to make heroes out of some of his people and actually turn some losers into winners for him. But let's go to Father in prayer first. Father, I thank you for another opportunity to minister to your people, Father. I ask you to use me just the way you want, Father. Let me say only what you want me to say, nothing more and nothing less. Help people, Father, to open up their spirits and not only receive the word, but study the word for themselves. And Father, we give you all the praise and the honor, Father, in the mighty name of Yahshua, by the blood of Yahshua. You can write this scripture down in Micah chapter 2, verse 13, that the breaker goes ahead of us and gives us the breakthrough. But I want you to turn with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. You got Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians. See, the breaker is going ahead of us and wants to make heroes for him in this pre-rapture season. And as I mentioned, even make winners out of losers. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26. He likes to use people that are really humble and depend upon him for just about everything, that are sold out to him. Maybe they're not important in some people's eyes, but to the Father, they really are. It's like the potter and the clay. He just wants to make the clay into the image that he wants, the potter, and also the Father wants to make us into the image of Yahshua. So the main requirement for the Father using us in these last days, in this pre-rapture season, is to surrender everything to him, turn our flesh over to the Father, so he can mortify the deeds of our flesh, make us more like Yahshua, and bring the fruit of the Spirit out of us: love, joy, peace, longsuffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. He wants that total surrender to him so he can make something beautiful out of our lives, from ashes to beauty. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26. For ye see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. The Father gets so much praise when he raises up a nobody. That's a nobody in some people's lives and makes them into a somebody. I'm going to say it again. The Father gets tremendous praise when he can raise up somebody who's a nobody in some people's eyes and make him into a somebody. Look what he did with Esther, Mordecai. In verse 27, but the Father had chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and the Father had chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. Paul said, when I'm weak, then I'm strong. When we are weak in ourselves, we can be strong in him. The Father just takes over. When we humble ourselves, he exalts us in some people's sight, that we belong to him. Just like with the apostles, they took note that they had been with Yeshua. The arresting authorities took note that they had been with Yeshua by the way they spoke, by the miracles that the Father did through them, the boldness that they had. These are the same ones that ran away when Yeshua was arrested. But the change happened on Pentecost, when the Spirit of the Father came into them and filled them with the Spirit, the boldness. Verse 28, and the base things of the world and things which are despised had the Father chosen, yet and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are, that no flesh should have any praise in his presence. But of him are you in Yeshua, who the Father has made unto us wisdom and righteousness and sanctification and redemption. Again, he's making us more like Yeshua when we surrender everything to him. That according as it is written, he that has any praise, let him give praise to Yahweh. But let's go to the left to 2 Samuel chapter 5. 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 17. That Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. Talking about how the Father gives us the breakthrough. He is the breaker. He's the battering ram. He's our battle axe. He goes ahead of us. Just like in World War II, you have infantrymen, soldiers that would go behind a tank as they went into battle. The tank would protect them. 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 17. But when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines came up to seek David, and David heard of it and went down to the hold. As soon as they anointed David to be king, here comes the enemy, the Philistines wanting to attack. What did David do? He went into the presence of the Father. If you're under any kind of attack, go into the presence of the Father. When you surrendered everything to Him, He's there to help you anytime you need it. Those of you who haven't surrendered everything to the Father, He's just waiting on you to run out of your flesh and surrender everything to Him. Paul said, in the flesh, the things I don't want to do, I do. The things I want to do, I don't do. Who's going to help me? But I thank the Father through Yahshua. And as a result, he said, there's no condemnation. Because I don't walk in the flesh, I walk in the Spirit. See, turn your salvation over to the Father. He'll help you to stay saved by advising you that you need to change. He wants to take something out of your life. It's a sanctification process. When you turn everything over to Him, He works on us on a daily basis, making us more like Yahshua. So when He points something out in our lives that He wants to take out of our lives, just say, Father, take it out. Don't try to argue with Him. You can try to buke and rebuke Him, but He's not going to leave it until He takes the core of that spiritual problem out of your life. So the Philistines spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim, verse 18. And verse 19, and David inquired of Yahweh, saying, shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into my hand? And Yahweh said unto David, go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into your hand. And David came to Baal Perazim, and David smote them there, and said, Yahweh had broken forth upon my enemies before me as the breach of waters. Therefore he called the name of the place Baal Perazim, or the place of the breakthrough. And there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. So in this pre-rapture season, he wants so many believers to get rid of their images. We talked about from Babylon, Constantine had the spirit of Antichrist around him, formed his type of Christianity, and he wanted pagans to become Christians too. He wanted all Rome to be Christianized, quote unquote. So he said, hey, you can bring your holidays into Christianity. We'll make them religious holidays. So you have to make sure you have no connection to that Babylonian spirit. Because the Father's going to destroy that Babylonian spirit. You don't want anything to connect to Constantine's Christianity. And it's really sad that most believers are connected to the Constantine Christianity. You have all these holidays that have all pagan roots, in contrast to the feast days. And so many beautiful believers say, the feast days are for the Jews. Well, Yeshua is a Jew, was a Jew, always will be a Jew. But Constantine caused that split to take everything Jewish from the early apostles' teaching. And this ministry wants to bring people back to what the apostles taught. With the help of the Father, He shows us what He wants me to teach people and to go back and restore and bring it to His believers. The enemy wanted those pagan holidays to be in contrast to the feast days, which are all about Yeshua. So many important events that happen in the Word happen on feast days. Yeshua was born on Passover, died on Passover. He was raised from the dead on the Feast of First Fruits, circumcised on the last day on unleavened bread. If you go to my website at henrywalker.org, you can study these feast days. And plus I have 2 free books on the bottom of my message page at henrywalker.org. One is called Noon, talks about the feast days, blessings at each month of the year according to the Hebrew calendar, certain hours in the day when the Father moves and blesses the most. And that book is free. And also I have another book at the bottom of my message page called Is the Trinity Really a Mystery? Explaining what the Trinity really is. They're both free. But we have to get back to what Yeshua taught the apostles and what the apostles taught to others before Constantine. See, the majority are in this Constantine Christianity. And the word says the road to heaven is straight and narrow and few are found on it. The road to hell is wide and many are found on it. But the really choice is up to you. You can say, I would feel like an outsider by giving up those things. that Evangelist Walker is talking about. But it's not basically what I'm saying is what the Word says. These are abominations to him. And so it's very important that you examine what came down from Constantine. Make sure it's not part of your life. Make sure it's not part of your spiritual walk with the Father. In verse 22, 2 Samuel 5, and the Philistines came up again and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. See, if you start doing what the Father's saying through this ministry, this podcast, you're going to have some people say, well, you're weird, I mean, look at all the people, they celebrate this, they celebrate that. How can you be right and so many people can be wrong? Well, it's because of 1,700 years of Constantine's junk coming down to people who love Yeshua and want to serve Yeshua. Most assemblies are under Constantine's Christianity. But the choice is up to you. This is an individual responsibility. We're all going to stand before Yeshua by ourselves. You're not going to stand before Yeshua and everybody in your assembly standing there too. No, it's you and Yeshua. What are you going to do about what I'm saying? Are you going to study? Are you going to pray about it? Every podcast I pray that people open up their spirits and not only receive the Word, but study the Word. Your eternal life could be dependent upon it. And the Father wants to raise up heroes in these last days to help people to get out of that junk, to get delivered from anything that's not of the Father. He's looking for people who he can just raise up, make winners out of losers. In verse 23, when David inquired of Yahweh, he said, thou shalt not go up. Yahweh said, but fetch a compass behind them and come upon them over the mulberry trees. And let it be when thou hearest the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry trees, then thou shalt bestir thyself, for then shall Yahweh go out before you to smite the host of the Philistines. There is the breaker going ahead of us. And David did so as Yahweh had commanded him, and smote the Philistines from Geba until thou comest to Gaza. Pray about what I'm saying. Study the Word by yourself. Let the Father talk to you, and be one of those heroes that's going to follow him and his Word only. Not some tradition, not some handed down stuff from Constantine. And it's a shame that most believers are under that umbrella of Constantine's Christianity. But 1,700 years had an effect on so many believers. But the Father can break it very quickly, and he wants to use us to help people to come out of Babylon. He says, come out of Babylon, my people. Let's go back to 1 Samuel 22. Go to the left, 1 Samuel 22. 1 Samuel 22, verse 1. We're talking about how the Father can make winners out of losers and wants to use us in these last days to bless a lot of people. And he wants to show up through us and show off through us. We want to present Yeshua to the world, to whoever he leads us to. But they want to see something different in us. And they want to take note that we have been with Yeshua. In 1 Samuel 22, verse 1, David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam. He was running away from Saul. And when his brethren and all of his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men. In the cave, hiding out in the cave. They were rejects, felt like losers, and David felt like a loser. But if you go to 1 Chronicles chapter 12, go to the right to 1 Chronicles chapter 12, after Kings, 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 1. These are they that came to David in Ziklag, when he yet kept himself close because of Saul, the son of Kish, and they were among the mighty men, helpers of the war. These are the rejects. The Father used David to make losers into winners, rejects into mighty men, helpers of the war. They were armed with bows. In verse 2, it could use both the right hand and the left in hurling stones and shooting arrows out of the bow, even of Saul's brethren of Benjamin. You know, I think about playing basketball. So many people are so good they can shoot with either hand. And they could use the bows with the right hand or the left hand. So the Father really used David again to raise up losers into winners. Let's go to 1 Chronicles 4. Just go to the left. 1 Chronicles 4, verse 9. 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9, again talking about from a loser to a winner. The breaker's going ahead of us and using us in these last days like we never been used before. It's like the Acts of the Apostles all over again. And he's going to get all the praise and the honor because he's the one that's doing it through us. It's important. All we have to do is show up like Jehoshaphat. Show up at any battle. He will win the battle for us. We'll get the spoils. He'll get the praise and the honor. He wants to keep blessing us with more and more finances to help more and more people. And first, Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9, and Jabez. See, Jabez's name means sorrow. And Jabez was more honorable than his brethren. And his mother called his name Jabez, saying, because I bore him with sorrow. But he didn't want to be connected to that name as sorrow. Verse 10, and Jabez called on the Elohim of Israel, saying, oh, that thou would bless me indeed, and enlarge my coast, and that thy hand might be with me, and that thou would keep me from evil, that it may not grieve me. And the Father granted him that which he requested. He was so humble. There's no sorrow around him. That's what he wanted. He wanted to be blessed. He wanted to be enlarged to do something for the Father. He wanted his hand to be with him. There's a song that I really like about, I can't even walk without you holding my hand, Yahshua. Jabez said, I want your hand to be with me. I can't do it alone. And that you would keep me from evil. He sure can. When you surrender everything to him, he will keep us from evil, that it may not grieve me. And Father granted him all that he requested. Let's go back to the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 3. Genesis, Exodus. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert. It came to the mountain of Elohim, even to Horeb. And Yahweh appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. As you surrender everything to the Father, and he uses you in these last days, this pre-rapture, he'll make sure that no harm comes your way. May have some pressures coming against you, but the pressures will just drive you closer to the Father. And you know that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Doesn't mean that no weapons will be formed against you, but they will be. But greater is the Father in you than he is in the world. And if he be for us, who can be against us successfully? Nobody. It says in Psalm 27, verse 1, Yahweh is our light and our salvation. Whom shall we fear? Yahweh is the strength of our lives. Of whom shall we be afraid? Nobody. When our enemies, even our foes, came upon us to eat up our flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp against us, our heart shall not fear. Though war should rise up against us, we'll be confident that we belong to Yah, and he's protecting us. So it got Moses' attention because he said, hey, this bush is not being burned. And the one who's talking to me in the midst of the bush is not being burned. Verse 4, and when Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, he called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Whenever the Father mentions somebody's name twice, it's more than very important. Remember when he was trying to get Samuel's attention? He said, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel thought he was talking to Eli. Samuel, Samuel. Samuel was such a great prophet that the Philistines could not come into Israel and attack while he was the prophet. That's how powerful he was. And people in Israel were so concerned when he came walking around. So much power. In verse 6, and Yahweh said, I am the Elohim of your father, of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon Yahweh. And Yahweh said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. He's saying, hey, there are people out there that are hurting. They don't have any answers to what's happening in the world. They have nobody that they can trust upon. The Father is allowing all that junk, all that confusion, all that mistrust, all that fear to draw people to him. I'm the one you're looking for. So many people are in alcohol and drugs. They're looking for Yahshua, but they're going in the wrong things. There's no peace in any of this stuff, but he is the Prince of Peace. The shalom in his presence. Peace. Verse 8, I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them out of that land unto a good land and a lodge unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. They're all sites. They have no power. And the Father wants us to take some people's places because they would not obey the Father and go the extra mile with him. They didn't believe his promises and do what he said. So the Father's raised up somebody who will take their place, just like David took Saul's place. Verse 9, now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now, therefore. See, he knows who's coming against you. He knows who's coming against the people in the United States and the world. And he wants us to let the people know that he sees what's happening to you. It says in Genesis 22, when the Father asked Abraham to offer up Isaac, and Abraham said to Isaac that the Father would provide himself a lamb. And Abraham named the place, it says Jehovah Jireh, and people think he's our provider, which he is, but it's really, Jehovah is a 15th century word, and Hovah, H-O-V-A-H, means wicked. His name is not Jehovah, it's Yahweh. There's no J in the Hebrew language anyway. It never was, never will be. So Jehovah, H-O-V-A-H, is in 1942, 1943 in the Hebrew Concordance. It means wicked. And so it's really Yahweh, Yahweh, Y-A-R-E-H. A lot of people believe it means Yahweh is our provider, like I said, and he does provide, but it really means Yahweh sees. Abraham saw Yahshua hanging up there for us, and he said the Father will provide himself a lamb for sacrifice, talking about the Father in Yahshua. So in him willing to offer up his son Isaac, the Father said, in blessing I'm going to bless you, and multiplying I'm going to multiply. He said, I'm going to define blessing and multiplication by how I bless and multiply your seed. So the Father sees everything that's happening to us out there, to everybody in the whole world at the same time. But he's looking for somebody who may feel like they're losers to let him become winners out of them. To raise up somebody who somebody least expects to be raised up. That's us. We're in a minority, and it's great to be in a minority because the apostles were in a minority. Even on the day of Pentecost, first day, 3,000 came to the Father, and next day, 5,000. But that was a small amount to the millions that came to Jerusalem for the Feast of Pentecost. So if you want to serve the Father, get comfortable in being in minority. Let the Father bring certain people into your life who you can trust and pray with, and network together. But let him just raise us up to be what he wants us to be a voice in these last few months before he comes back. We talked on the last podcast about how after Hitler came into power, on January 30th, 1933, 1 year later, there is a series of 3 lunar eclipses, 34, 35, and 36. Exactly 1 year later, that first eclipse started. So in 2024, 25, and 26, there are 3 lunar eclipses happening, all on the Feast of Purim, which we'll be talking about pretty soon. Purim starts on February 14th. And so in 24, 25, and 26, again, there's 3 lunar eclipses in a row, all happening on the Feast of Purim, as I mentioned. And going 1 year back from that first lunar eclipse in 2024, we get to March 25th, 2023 this year, where somebody like Hitler, somebody like Haman could be raised up, and the Antichrist himself, possibly at that time. So anytime between now and then, the rapture could happen. It could be later, but the beginning of the year is Nisan 1. On March 23rd. You can't base your walk with Yahshua on January 1st being the start of the year connected to him. You can't. You'll never succeed. January 1st to December 31st is, most people are on that for tax purposes, but you can't say, all right, it's January 2nd, Father, I believe for a new beginning. It'll never happen because he's still got 3 months to go. A student can't tell a teacher, end the course. You can't end your walk with Yahshua on December 31st just because the world does that. In Exodus chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, he says, this is the beginning of the year for you. And it says in chapter 13, verse 4, you came out the month of Abib. Abib is another name for Nisan 1. You had to base your walk with the Father on his Hebrew calendar. So many believers are basing their walk with Yahshua on the pagan calendar, number one, the Gregorian calendar. And 1201 is starting the day. They're missing out so much on the Father's timing. He's all about timing. Again, he was born on Passover, died on Passover, exactly 33 years old. He's all about timing. And the start of the day is not 12:01 a.m. Where in the Word is there anything about the day starting at 12:01 a.m.? But we know in Genesis 1, evening and morning were the first day. The day starts at evening. So Yahshua said, are there not 12 hours in a day? So the day runs from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's 12 hours. From 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. are 12 hours in a night. So the day starts at 6 p.m. That's when you start the day for prayer. 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. is the first watch in the night. It's a beautiful time to pray for the day up ahead. If you want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and start the day you think, you're about 10 hours late. So here the Father's choosing Moses. In verse 10, come now therefore, and I'll send you unto Pharaoh, Moses, that you may bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto the Father, who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? So certainly I'll be with you. That's all we need to know in his final push before the rapture, is that he is with us. And he's the greater one in us. It says in verse 12, as I read, as he said, certainly I'll be with you, and this shall be a token unto you that I have sent you. That's all we need to know. When you have brought forth the people out of Egypt, not if, you shall serve me upon this mountain. And Moses said unto the Father, behold, when I'm coming to the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, the Yahweh of your fathers had sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them? And the Father said unto Moses, I am that I am. Whatever you and I need him to be, he'll be there for us. What kind of a general would just send his troops out and not be there to help them? See, just like in the military, if the general is sending the troops out, he's going to say, we're all going out at 0600, 6 o'clock in the morning. That's why it's so important to be on the Father's timing, his schedule. So please let the Father finish out this 3 months. Give you a brand new beginning after you surrender everything to him. He's still working on us this year. He works on us on a year-to-year basis. Besides the Sabbath is so much about Yahshua. The Sabbath runs from Friday 6 p.m. to Saturday 6 p.m. It's the end of the week, and he wants to refresh us, go over things that happened in the week, give us more power to go into the week, and the week starts on Saturday night at 6 p.m. So many people are missing that. I'm asking you to study it. This is what the apostles taught. Before we go any further, as you may or may not know, this is a pro-life ministry. We believe that life begins at conception. And science, for the most part, believes that life begins at conception. They say at a moment the sperm cell of the human male meets the ovum of the female, and the union results in a fertilized ovum, a zygote. A new life has begun. Distinct from everybody else, a new life. So, we want to pray for the babies in the womb. Just join me as we pray for those babies. Father, I ask you to touch the babies in the womb. Bring them to a full birth, Father. And you get all the praise and the honor, Father. In the mighty name of Yahshua, by the blood of Yahshua. Now, if any of you out there had an abortion, repent. Ask the Father to forgive you and go on. So, we want to pray for you right now. Just put your hand on a computer, on your cell phone. We want to pray for you right now. Remember, we're talking about surrendering everything to the Father, allowing him to use us in these last days in a dramatic, powerful way, and even to make winners out of some losers. It's just so very important that we become all we can be by allowing him to do it through us. And to tell people that this is the last days. and get the Babylonian system out of their lives and surrender everything to the Father and serve Him and get ready for the rapture and avoid the tribulation. So let's go to Father in prayer right now. And if you don't know that you're saved, just surrender everything to the Father. And those of you who have surrendered everything to the Father, just receive a miracle in any part of your life that you need a miracle. Or miracles. Father, touch people from the top of their heads to the soles of their feet. And besides these healing miracles, Father, touch them in any area of their lives that they need a miracle, Father. They surrendered everything to you. And Father, we give you all the praise and the honor, Father, in the mighty name of Yahshua, by the blood of Yahshua. So thank you for listening to this podcast. And remember to next time, this is Evangelist Henry Walker saying, greater is the Father in you, your daddy, the King of the universe, than he that is in the world.